Hey, look what we have found. A big sound in a small town. Far away from the bright lights. They're making music every night. Discover what is all around. A big sound. A big sound. In a small town. Big sound, small town. A really big sound. Big sound, small town.
You're listening to Big Sound, Small Town with Sandy Carlton.
Well, hi.
Hi.
How's it going? My name's Jared Engle.
Right.
Really happy to be here, and happy to be here at the Earl Scruggs
Yes, wonderful.
Festival. It's a really beautiful festival, really beautiful day.
It is. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have you on Big Sound Small Town. Although I was aware of your playing, it is fabulous. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, thank you very much. I started playing bass. I guess I'm just going to start from the beginning here. I started playing bass when I'm 42 years old. I started playing bass when I was about 10 years old. I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
And chose the upright bass as my instrument in school.
Right.
They gave you the choice of
Sure.
instruments, and that's the one I chose right away. I said I want to play the upright bass.
Wow.
And it took a long time after that for me to discover bluegrass.
Right.
And discover, not just bluegrass, but discover jazz and
Right.
kind of fun things you can do with the upright bass.
Right.
It's not just playing
Sure.
in the orchestra.
In the orchestra, and I guess you
section.
started out bowing and stuff also with
Yes.
that. Yes, that's yeah.
So, but I did discover, I guess I didn't really know what a great choice I made when I was 10 years old.
Right.
So it took me a few years to realize, oh, wow, there's all these cool things you can do.
There really is, particularly an acoustic upright bass. I mean, it has sounds unless you play a fretless that you just can't get out of another instrument, a bass instrument.
Right.
I mean, you can slap it. You can, there's so many things that you can do that goes beyond just the musical notes.
Yeah.
And you've learned them all. It looked to me like you've learned all the tricks. So I guess you've continued doing that. I mean, I guess you did it in high school.
Yep. I played, sometime in maybe around, I want to say 12 or 13, or let's say, they started offering jazz band in high school or middle school at that point, and that's, of course, very, it's jazz for 13-year-olds.
Yeah.
So it's a nice introduction.
Yeah.
And then sometime in high school, I started discovering more, great, really great music. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking of Miles Davis.
Yeah, Miles Davis is great music.
So
yeah.
you start to hear that stuff, and you're like, okay, cool. Wow, there's some really beautiful. You start to understand. You start to realize the spiritual.
I guess you moved to
music,
like Ron Carter and stuff like that.
Course,
Yeah, because it's I mean, very. I know lots of bass players. I'm a bass player.
Okay.
Chris is a bass player. We and we're both upright bass players when we play music beside do podcasts. But you're a fine one. I mean, I hear them all the time.
Yeah.
And
great ones here. I've seen Daniel Kimbrough.
Yes, he's good too. Yeah. Oh yeah. But then, how did that ever get to be? I mean, you could play the jazz and play that forever and work. So how did you fall into bluegrass?
Really, there's no good answer to that question. I've wondered this myself. My parents weren't bluegrass listeners. My parents aren't even really. They're not musicians. My mom has a passion for. I grew up listening to like the Beatles. And things like that, like around the house.
Right.
But yeah, I like I said, I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Right,
so
which is bluegrass. It's not a bluegrass hotbed.
Not a hotbed. No. I mean, there is a lot of music in Rochester, thanks to the Eastman School of Music.
Sure.
But I mean, certainly not bluegrass. And I discovered, I think the first album I heard a banjo on was probably the Shady Grove album by Jerry Garcia.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good starting place too.
Yeah.
I mean, Grissman kind of has a jazz background too, so
Yes.
I mean, it's not just straight up parking lot bluegrass.
Yeah. So I heard that album, and I was really drawn to the banjo.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, that's such a great instrument.
it is a great
And
instrument.
I convinced my parents to get me a banjo. So I ended up playing. By the time I was I think when I was 15, I started getting into banjo playing and playing. I learned how to play clawhammer.
Yeah, clawhammer's great.
So that became part of my identity, basically. But, like really getting into the banjo and loving the banjo, and then it wasn't until I went to the Berklee College of Music, started in 2000 there, and
When you went there, though, you went as a bass.
As a bass-
I mean,
as
yeah,
a bass
okay,
student, yeah.
okay, yeah. That's very obvious in your playing, yeah.
Thanks. And so there used to be, and I guess not anymore, but there used to be a weekly jam session at the Cantab Lounge in Cambridge.
Yeah,
It's pretty on the
yeah,
map,
yeah, it is.
or it was.
Yeah,
it's
it was, yeah,
stopped a couple
right.
years ago, I think. But so that's where I think I really understood for the first time what bluegrass music was, by going to those jam sessions. Before that, I was kind of like anything with the banjo.
Right, it's
Always
bluegrass, yeah.
I started going to the Cantab, and I was like, oh, this is bluegrass. There's a format.
Yeah, yeah.
There's people take solos in between the verses.
Right.
And you can only have one mandolin player. The whole thing.
Sure.
The way the banjo.
Yeah.
Sorry, the way the bluegrass is organized.
Right, yeah.
That was where I got my education and all that.
Yeah, I mean, like your mandolin is your snare player,
Yeah,
so
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
or your drummer for the most part. So,
Yeah.
and that is one of the things that I noticed how well you work with the other musicians, because and we'll take it out here. There were a lot of different musicians, and yet you handle, all that stuff just brilliantly,
Well, thank you.
and your intonation's just fabulous.
Oh, thanks so much.
I mean, it's a fretless instrument, and sometimes, people struggle. I mean, it's just like playing the fiddle. People struggle playing the violin, the fiddle with intonation. The older players used to. I used to go to old time fiddle contests and stuff, and sometimes even the guys that were really, really good, Tommy Gerald, that crowd, their intonation was bad.
Yeah.
And I've played with a lot of bass players that play upright, that their intonation, they can play fine, but their intonation is, a little sharp, a little flat, not always on the, So,
Well, thank you. I don't know. Of course, I think you talk to any professional fretless musician, and they're always going to feel very self-conscious about their intonation.
Sure. I mean, I think everybody does.
I feel that I wish I could agree.
Well, but no, it's good. I mean, it is because you're not just you're just not root fiving it. You're not just playing the root and the root and fourth. You're not exactly just walking it.
And a lot of what happened today was that for most of what we did today, we didn't have a mandolin player.
Right.
And of course, we were blessed by having the Michaels with us.
Sure,
Michael
yeah.
Cleveland and Michael Daves.
Yeah.
And no slouches.
No.
And they're very sensitive to providing what the mandolin player provides, which is the backbeat.
And it's in his chop. It's in the fiddle chop.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Michael Cleveland is
Sure.
doing the chop, and Michael Daves also does a version of some sort of fiddle, some sort of mandolin chop.
He's a fine rhythm player. I think that gets lost on people. Is Michael is such a fine rhythm player too.
I mean, I have yet to see what Michael Davis is not.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He's fantastic.
So, how did you get hooked up with those guys?
The short story is, so I met Tony. I started playing music with Tony Trischka, I think I want to say 10 or 11 years ago. I was recommended. So I had done a couple of tours with Abigail Washburn.
Yeah, I know Abigail and Bale.
And through her, I became good friends with Brittany Haas.
Yeah.
The wonderful fiddler.
Sure, she's fabulous too.
And she had worked with Tony a lot, and I gather that Tony had asked her he needed a bass player,
Right.
and he asked her if she knew any bass players in New York.
Right.
And so so Brittany recommended me. That's my understanding of it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good person. That's another fabulous musician who is just unworldly too.
Yeah.
So you've gotten yourself in awfully good company.
I have to. Yeah, I would agree.
So, and I guess that's worked out. I mean, I guess you've worked with Tony now.
I think at least I lost track, but it's been at least a decade. So yeah, we've done a lot together now.
He talked.
I've done a couple records.
Yeah.
There's another great record
Getting ready to come out. Yeah.
You probably heard about that.
He was here yesterday,
Okay,
and this is a part that I love today. So he did. I think it is the wedding song,
Yeah.
and where you guys played the ending. Is that the one that has the ending where it's you and Tony, and it's just a single note, and it ends the song?
Oh shoot! What
Is off of the Earl Scruggs John Hartford thing.
Well, so they did the bride processional.
That's
song.
what it. Yeah, but
Was it
yeah. Does it end with him playing a single string and the two of you?
You're right. You're right. So when they performed it today,
Yeah.
So that's just a fiddle and banjo breakdown, at least in our set,
Right.
and that's because Tony's trying to recreate those
The-
jam
yeah,
sessions.
that's what he told me yesterday.
Yeah,
He-
the Hartford
Sure.
Scruggs jam sessions, and so it's pretty much an inside joke to anyone who would know this. He plays, I think, some sort of like maybe just the open strings.
Yeah, he
on
does.
his
I
banjo,
think he
or
did.
maybe on the fiddle. I can't remember who does it.
Right.
And that is actually true to those
Yeah,
recordings, those
right.
historic recordings
Right.
that he's trying to recreate. So yeah, that might be. I think that's what you're referring to.
I think it is, and it was, and the reason he ended it that way is oh no, it was the one where it's the bass and banjo.
Okay, so that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a song that we do. It's called "Can't Stop Me from Dreaming."
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
And that's also we're trying to recreate. It was Earl and cousin Jake who
Right.
do their duos.
Yeah.
Probably it's when someone broke a string and they had to fill time on stage. I'm guessing that's
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
impetus of the duos. But so there's the bass banjo duos, and Tony. So Earl ends that duo by playing Route 5th.
Right,
As
right.
said,
Yes, he does.
Bum, bum,
Yep,
bum, bum,
yep.
bum, 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 bum.
Right.
That's what he does, and Tony has accurately figured out. I think I would agree with this. He figured out that is Earl, imitating, or maybe I would say they're mimicking.
Mimicking would probably be better.
Mimicking
The bass.
Yeah, and how simple the bass.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's kind of what he implied to me yesterday when he was here. It's like,
Yeah.
and so he sat here yesterday and did most of those, a ton of those John Hartford, Earl Scruggs songs. Then today, when I heard you guys do your first set,
Yeah.
that came to life because it was him with the banjo, and then when he added you guys in, what he was talking about here and playing for me with his banjo, it just like exploded when he added the whole band to it. Just like the bass, I could imagine it while he was doing it, the bass and banjo, but then when the two of you guys did it, it was just like exploded.
Yeah.
It's really good. And
I think that's the goal of music, right? Is trying to make something, trying to create something.
Sure.
Maybe trying to create a fun atmosphere, or something exciting.
I walked away each time y'all played today. Somebody said, "That bass player, man, he can really play. He's just not. He's not your standard bluegrass bass player. I mean, he's and I've known Mike Bubb, Mike, and
Of course, one of the greats, one of the
Yeah,
all-time greats.
yeah.
And
And,
a hero of mine.
and since you started with banjo, Mark Schatz is a clawhammer banjo player too, right?
Yeah.
And an excellent bass player, better bass player than he is.
Well, he sets the bar pretty high with his bass playing.
Yeah, he does.
He's such
Yeah.
a great bass player.
Yeah.
But I will say he's an excellent flying banjo player.
He is.
I had one of his albums, and I listened to it a lot where he's playing banjo.
Yeah. And a mighty fine dancer. Before I forget.
I mean, gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Keeps going.
But yeah, I think he gives you a lot of room to go. I mean, I think that he's not holding you. Tony's not holding you down to a simple bass line.
Yeah, well, Tony has a long history of not really trying to adhere.
Yeah, true, he does.
The standard. He's always been trying to take things out, push things further, and by giving the bass player some room. I think that's part of Tony's general approach to playing.
I think that would be a good gig because you do get to play. You actually get to play and be a pretty shining part of the just like Michael and just like Michael. I mean,
Michael,
yeah. I mean, you also had your space in there to do your thing, which is just great for a bass player.
Thanks, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I really just feel like most of the time really just trying to hold it down and be as simple as possible. That's honestly what I'm really trying to do. But then, sure, there are moments that other things happen,
and that has to feel good as a player to get to do that. I mean, bass, if you let it, can get kind of boring.
Yeah.
In a bluegrass.
It's not supposed to be exciting. Let's be clear.
This is true.
Bass is supposed to be
true.
Boring is not necessarily a criticism.
No, it's really not. And actually, you can overplay easily,
Exactly.
and a lot of people do that too. But I like what you do. I think I have become a real fan of your bass playing. I've listened to it on record, but then when I saw it live, it was like, wow, man, I need to talk to this guy because he's got it going on as a bass player, And you kind of, I know all of the other bluegrass bass players, but, of course, Tony has this whole New York connection,
Right.
and
he likes to call it New York City or Brooklyn. I think specifically he would call it the home of bluegrass music, or what is it? I'm sure. No, I can't remember. But the joke was that for a while there was like such a hotbed of bluegrass musicians in Brooklyn.
Yeah, there were, and it's definitely turned out some fine musicians, even bluegrass musicians. Yeah. So it's
there was a period. It's kind of I guess cooled down a little bit, but there was a time, thinking back like 7-ish years ago when like Mike Barnett, all the Punch Brothers were living in Brooklyn. Mike Barnett, Dominic Leslie, Courtney Hartman.
Yeah.
I can't even think of all the great bluegrass musicians that once were living in Brooklyn, and that's how And Tony was sort of, he would kind of draw. He would get musicians from that to fill out his bands.
Yeah, and he's done well with it. I like his stuff because it is very innovative, very, very. I auditioned for a band one time. This is hilarious, and I had heard standard banjo playing because I run my podcast out of the Earl Scruggs Center, so I'm steeped hard in banjo.
Okay.
So I go for this audition, and the guy is playing chromatic banjo.
Sure.
And that was new to me. This has been almost 50 years ago, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I said, man, I really like that stuff. And I said, that's really different. He said, yeah, I know this guy, Tony Trischka. He said, everything I can find of his, I just break it down and learn everything I can by him. And that was like an eye-opening thing for me. It was like, wow, there is life outside of Earl Scruggs,
Well, and I gotta say, that's the great thing. I mean, having traveled around with Tony a lot and played all these gigs, pretty much every gig, there's someone that's coming up to him that is saying something like that, saying like, wow, I've always, I've learned so much from your records.
Sure.
he's been an idol, I think, to a lot of banjo players. And maybe just bluegrass musicians in general. He's been an idol for many decades now, and that's, it's easy to not think about that all the time, but it's great to see that and be reminded of that.
Right. Well, he told me he entered a banjo contest one time. Ralph Stanley was the one of the judges, and he said, he played his version, and his version's got some they do some quirky stuff in them, and he realized why he didn't win. I mean, he said, I didn't play it traditionally.
Yeah.
And he said, well, but I was okay with that, so, but he said there was a great banjo player, famous Ralph Stanley. I can't remember who else, somebody else was the judge. And, he said, I thought I played it just really, really cool and great. And then I realized, well, they're not looking for cool and great. They're looking for, just like classical music, perfect imitation of it. You know how classical works. Yeah. I mean, it's emulation is what you're after. I mean, you're going to play it just like the composer. No, very little improvising. You're going to play the notes that are written out on the page, and I think that's what bluegrass before Tony had gotten to a little bit. And then Tony played. I'm going to play a sixth here that probably you won't get, but it's cool. It'll work, or
we'll make it work.
Yeah. So and that is just really cool. You're a good fit though with him. He's
Thanks.
You work with other people too?
At the moment, I mean, yes, I'm a full-time musician, so
yeah,
I have to.
I do understand that.
I do a lot of things to stay busy, but in the bluegrass realm, I'm not really. I think I'm just playing with Tony. That's about the only person I'm playing bluegrass with.
Yeah.
There was a time that I played. There's a bar in the East Village in New York City called Mona's. And now they still have a Monday night bluegrass jam session, and it's a great spot. If anyone is looking for where to find bluegrass in New York, I would point to Mona's on Monday nights. And so I used to be in the house band for many years.
Sure.
And I was in several different bluegrass bands over the years. But at the moment though, I'm just kind of playing bluegrass with Tony, and then I go back and when I'm back home in Brooklyn, I'm playing a lot of jazz and traditional jazz, kind of like 1920s, 1930s era jazz. Yeah,
that's kind of where I was going with that. I wondered if you worked outside of bluegrass.
Yes.
And figured you must, because Tony's the only person that I have seen you with. So, so I figured you must be playing, and I knew you did this full time. So I knew you must have been playing with something different too.
Yeah, I somehow stayed very busy. I guess it's just a product of being a bass player.
It is,
I also play almost half of what I do when I'm just gigging around New York City is I'm playing 4-string banjo. Actually, I play like plectrum banjo.
Yeah.
And so that's in the style of the 1920s, 1930s jazz style.
Yeah, that's cool though.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a cool genre of music, without a doubt. Now, that is really interesting, because it is two worlds colliding a bit, Yeah. And we got the jazz. I mean, the jazz background and the Berkeley background is real evident in your playing, But it works great in with Tony. I mean, it's great with what it does, Like I say, you're my new favorite. and you've been a hit here. I don't know if you've heard it or not, but everywhere I've been around, you got to see that bass player with Tony. He might be the best person in the band, So
I don't even know. I'm not even going to respond to that.
You don't have to. You don't have to. But it's too cool. I mean, you made an impact, which is a good thing. I think every musician at some point likes to make an impact, and I think you really did today here.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate you coming and doing this.
Yeah.
This was. I have a lot of listeners, and you need way more publicity than what you have. More people need to know about you. Like a secret, you know.
All right. Well, I expect that I'll have a million new
Sure.
followers
Yeah.
after this.
Sure. I hope. Oh, you have do you promote yourself with web pages or stuff like that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I'm on Instagram. That's you can find me on Instagram. That's Engle, ENGEL _ Jared, JARED. You can probably just search for me, Jared Engle. I have a website, jaredengle.com. I'm not really promoting any specific project at the moment, so
But at least people can
find me and say hi or whatever.
Yeah, and probably that has links to stuff you play on. So.
Oh yeah, my website has tons of links.
Yeah.
You can see
So.
the albums that I've been on, and there's some videos of things that I've done. So if you're curious.
Yeah, that's good. Again, thank you for coming and doing this because I know you're on a tight schedule.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much.
You.